second.
So try and load it up from there to get that on in. Some of it is so I can see that you can open up PowerPoint and include something. Some of it is so I can see that you can actually load something up on Connect. I feel like, Dr. I don't even have a photo in this and I can't upload, and I haven't put anything else, then we'll know it's an IT issue or so. But not only that, it's a way to get a couple early points on in, something in your file. And chance for me to get to know some of you, because most people I already know from political science majors, but for most of you, I recognize a couple of y'all, I know a couple of you, I don't know everybody, so it's also a way to figure out what subject you're interested in. Now that you've got your presentation in, I want you to start looking at the next phase, storytelling. I want you to approach this as you would approach any assignment in the core program. I think one reason core programs tend to get low marks is you think, this is something I have to take, something I have to do. That I would rather do something in my major, I would rather get something. Why not use this as an opportunity to take assignments that would help you in whatever you're interested in, a career or hobbies or something like that. That's why I found I'm working on a giant annual report. It's up to 43 pages. I started it just before Labor Day weekend. It's huge, it's got pages more. It's something I have to do. And I was like, oh gosh, you hate to do something you have to do, correct? Then I thought about it, I thought, what if it was something I wanted to do? And so I did a lot of things that we haven't done before in the annual report. I'm obviously working on all this stuff about political science majors, so I'm using this as an opportunity to get more stuff about what our students do. It was a good opportunity to see what our students like and dislike about the program. And yeah, some of it was because Florida State was playing University of Mississippi. But I found myself staying up till 2 in the morning working on this thing going, this is interesting and exciting. It's something you have to do, but it's going to be something that I now want to do. I know it's not easy. It took me a day or two to figure this out. But try and do that with any given assignment. Say, don't look at it as something you have to do. Look at it as an opportunity for putting in something. Maybe it's, if you're like an undecided major or something, and you're like, okay, not sure what I want to do. Let me take a look at this area and see if something I'd be interested in, storytelling, can apply to it. If you're not sure that your topic is going to be good enough for American experience, email me about it. We've already, I think I've had 2 people email me about this assignment already. Do that for current and future assignments. Please do so. I apologize for not getting back. I think I saw the email and I was like, oh, I should have sent that like yesterday. So I sent a response this morning. I'll try and be even more on top of that. Because with online courses, even hybrid ones, people want feedback. So definitely try and get that for you today. This week we have analytical thinking, and then next week we've got a movie, we've got a TV series to watch, and we've got a storyteller, guest speaker coming in on Friday. Y'all remember I promised you that I would put in for cultural enrichment? I did yesterday. Has it been approved yet? I'll let you know soon. Otherwise, you get class attendance for that day, you get a really interesting speaker, so that's 2 out of 3. We'll see if we can get CE credit. What that means is we might have to actually share a couple chairs, wheel in a few if we have a couple guest speakers, because that's what they're going to say. Is it open to everybody? I have to make it open to everybody. How many people are going to show up to a CE at 8:30 a.m.? Who can say? A couple of you are shaking your heads. Would this be an interesting Mythbuster test? A couple of people showed up for donuts. How about an excellent guest speaker or a CE event? We'll see. All right, let me do attendance so I can get through that. Bruno? Tony? See. Alex? Come in. Brittany? Megan? Jordan? Wesley? Brandon? Kadarius? Lauren? Jacob? I had 2 Jacobs. Do you want to say Jacob, Jacob K and Jacob W, or Mr. Krzyzak and Mr. Wood? Okay, I'll do my best. Andy? Elizabeth? Yeah, okay, so I got a response to yours. Does it come up on your phone? Very good. Good Lord, we have 3 Jacobs. Jacob B, Jacob R, and Jacob T. Okay, Mr. Let's see, Jared, that's fine. And Julie, unfortunately, dropped the class. I'll try and talk her getting back in. I think she'll want to switch over to German. Lane Scott, who's an English professor, I remember one time I went over to see her about a matter with core, and I sat outside the classroom where she was teaching the last 15 minutes, and I thought, I was like so tired. I was like, my gosh, I was like, I must be so far gone. I need sleep so badly. I swear I hear Dr. Scott speaking in German in that class. That's what it sounds like to me, because I know a little bit of German. And it turned out she was. None of us knew that she was covering for a professor who teaches German. I was thinking, oh, thank God, I'm not going insane. You know, I mean, people here speaking in tongues. I hear somebody speaking in German. Go figure. But I would suggest and look for a discussion post from me. That's where you can post your topic. So I'll say discussion post. That's a good way to post your topic. Maybe somebody else can, you know, I can see it, other people can see it. They can get feedback. You know, somebody's got an idea, you'll be like, okay, somebody's got that idea. I'm going to do this one. Okay, here's the extra credit thing. This is a little off schedule, but I thought it was kind of interesting. As I mentioned, when people started coming in, I wrote a column about Colin Kaepernick and the national anthem protest. And I had a former sociology major, a person who graduated from here, sociology major, who took me for American experience. And this person was pretty critical of my column and raised a lot of good points. My wife looked at his comment and went, yeah, he's right, about a lot of things. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And it came down to the issue of whether the protest was helpful or not. And I was not saying I disagreed with like what was behind it. I just didn't know if that was the right tactic. Because I've written plenty about other things. That he was insisting that it brought a lot of good attention and stuff like that to the issue. People are talking about it now rather than sweeping under the rug. I was thinking that it might have people who would otherwise agree with the message, but who like the national anthem, you know, or like displays of patriotism, might step back. So here's the idea I have, and I looked up this morning to take a look about polls and how people feel about it, and I couldn't find anything. So these things take a while to go through. It's not like they have a snap poll. Anybody ever seen the movie Machete? Y'all have it? Oh, you guys have it. There was something where like an assassination attempt takes place, and like within like 15 minutes they say, polls release show, and I'm like, oh gosh, it doesn't work like that in real life. A couple of weeks on the subject. Even after 9/11, I think it took three days or so for somebody to get together a representative sample to see how people felt in it. But nevertheless, I want to take a look at that as like an extra credit thing I might kick out to y'all. So when we're going over myth busting, when we're going over analytical thinking, that's something you might want to take a look at to see whether such protests are, I mean, a lot of other people are starting to do it now, so the movement is spreading. But whether to see if this is something that's helpful or not, I thought it might be an interesting idea. So we should have more information by a midterm exam, so I might have y'all take a look into that.
You know his jersey's risen to third best selling in the NFL right now.
I did see that, yeah, where the best selling.
It's like the most merchandise they've ever sold for Colin Kaepernick in his professional career, pretty much.
It's outselling Johnny Manziel's jersey, which fell to $5. I'm looking for it because I would love for that to be like a Halloween, something where I could be Johnny Football. Y'all laugh. It won't be that long before he's bald. But nevertheless, I did hear he's re-enrolling in Texas A&M. Probably one of the better ideas. But nevertheless, what I'm going to do is, since I already have this planned for today, I would otherwise suggest this, but as we go through this, when I'll ask for examples of a theory, a hypothesis, maybe it could be about the subject we're looking at. I mean, I give you an example from that, but maybe you've got one of your own that you want to look at in a paper. The best way to approach this, I see a couple of y'all have notebooks. I see a couple of y'all have laptops. Remember my policy about laptops, stay on target. Whenever I say, give me an example of a theory, you can verbally give one, but I would do this regardless of whether I call on you or not. Write one down, because I'll be asking for them on the exams. Okay, so jot these on down. Just and go ahead and take a risk. America, one thing that we're known for is risk taking. Right? That's how other people see us, and that's kind of a pretty good way to define Americans. And I'm not saying other people don't take risks in other countries, but America's full of a lot of risk takers. take a risk. Say, how about this one as a theory? Or maybe this would be a good factor to look at or so. How about you do that? So active learning, when you're writing down stuff, I mean, look at the slides, save the slides, download the slides. If you have to print one set of slides, print this set of slides. Because they're designed to look at every single thing else we do. So if you have to print one thing and you've got like some limited, number of pages and stuff to print out, that might be a good one. Or at least download it onto a flash drive, save it. For all these. Save them all, but this should be the last thing thrown in the fire. When you're freezing cold, and it's like that movie Day After Tomorrow with Dennis Quaid. You ever see that? Yeah. Okay, Gutenberg Bible. That's the last thing should be thrown in. After that, these slides. Now, a couple of y'all, I think Tony's had a class with me before, Wesley had a class, so a couple of you, you've seen this before, but like all my others, every issue that we look at is different. Brandon's had one before, so you might recognize. No, actually, I didn't include these in the other, so regardless, I start off all my classes, except for social studies content and some of the intro classes. But I use these. Today is the birthday of a political science major, person who I taught here, who now teaches my kids. Really excited for him. In fact, I actually have taught 4 students who are now teachers of my kids. 2 things. One, it makes me feel really old. But secondly, it shows that if you put everything you can into teaching, you never know who it might affect. When I taught every one of these people, I never saw that any of them would ever be teaching my kids. But, whether I succeed or not, I always try really hard to get some points across. The first day he was teaching at LaGrange Academy, Britt Gaylor, who was one of the basketball players at LaGrange College. I don't know if he was a team captain, but he certainly was a leader on the court. He said, Dr. Tures, he goes, you know how you always start off your class with the catch a fish and teach somebody how to fish? I used that in my first day of class with the kids. Well, of course, they hadn't heard it before. They were, they were like smaller kids. He teaches like, some high school, some grade school or so. But I thought I was like so proud. I wouldn't even think of it that I was congratulating. I was like, thanks, great job. He's a basketball coach now. He's a teacher, and it was amazing to see that he would use that as well. The metaphor is, you've heard this before? Raise your hand if you've heard this one before. How many of y'all had him for the? No, you've heard that where you say, catch a fish, give it to a person, feeds them for a day. That's if I just gave you a bunch of slides, gave you a bunch of information, told you a lot of facts, made you memorize a timeline, made you memorize the presidents of the United States, made you memorize all 27 amendments to the Constitution. Are we up to 20? But you get the idea, right? That would be catching a fish. And the cool thing about, today is you can probably find this all here on your cell phone, right? The old days, you went to your family encyclopedia or you looked up in the library, right? That's catching a fish, however. However, what we're trying to do today is, you heard that phrase, teaching person. I'm trying to teach you a way to approach problems. Some of you have heard this before, perhaps, this style. Anybody here a science major? Social science major. Okay, so many of you have probably come across these concepts before. If they haven't been taught to you in class, you'll certainly pick them up in grad school. I gotta admit, when I went to college, I didn't get it explained exactly this way. I mostly picked this up in grad school. But increasingly, it's being employed. You may have seen some of this in high school, even if you haven't seen it here in college. Heck, the other day I was looking at my son's work that he was doing, and he was writing about a hypothesis. So he's in 4th grade. So there's certainly, with a big push on STEM, y'all heard about STEM, right? I don't mean like STEM. What is STEM?
Science, technology,
Engineering, math. So people are pushing social science and hard sciences, soft sciences, whatever. They're pushing on people at younger and younger ages. We can debate whether this is a good idea or not, but at least it's getting people to think about issues. Due next week, my son's assignment is he has to write about a famous scientist. And I emailed the teacher, I said, oh please, just don't have him do one of the usual suspects. And she emailed me back, she goes, no, it was the greatest thing. He said he wanted to study the people who discovered DNA. And I told him, those were 2 scientists, so you have to do 2 reports. He said that was cool. I can tell you how happy I rewarded him by letting him stay up for my fantasy football draft. He's upset this morning. He goes, "How was our draft grade, Doc?" "Yeah, Dad." I said, "We got a B-." But nevertheless, teaching someone to best. They're trying to get people to at least think a little more scientifically than they used to. Now, again, this is what you're being taught. You're not being taught to memorize. That's not what my intent is. I know I'm going to have multiple choice questions. That's because they still ask them on GMATs and GREs and LSATs and stuff. We'll still have some of those, although I'll do my best to elicit getting information rather than memorization. But it's designed to construct theories, derive hypotheses, and to provide some sort of test or analysis of them, and getting them toward research projects. So we'll do this on our research project for class with these ALE storytelling questions. Now, term science derives from knowledge. Interesting. So a lot of people are like, if you ever hear some politician go, "I'm against all this science." Well, I mean, you can take them at their word. I'm not saying science has all the answers. This is where I disagree. I always think that science is more of a process. You know, like trying to get knowledge rather than already having it. Anybody ever seen the movie Pursuit of Happiness? It's like, happiness is not something we can always have, Will Smith's character says, Corey Gardner. Maybe it's something we can always pursue but never quite attain. I always thought it was like a movie part. That's what the film won me over, is when you brought that up. But nevertheless, I mean, like when I teach political science, it's supposed to be, you know, the study of or trying to figure out what we know about politics. Make sense? So, hard sciences, biological sciences. And a theory is nothing more than a connection between variables. Normally you'll see it's like some long-winded dictionary definition all kids have to memorize. This is a simple one. It's a connection between two factors. Simple, right? 3 words. Connection between variables. Make sure we're going to emphasize what variables are. Now, there are some differences between the sciences. There are some similarities, like what a theory means for the hard sciences. Biology majors, chemistry majors, physics, psychology, sociology. A theory means the same thing. A hypothesis will mean the same thing. Independent and dependent variables mean the same thing. Positive and negative relationships mean the same thing. They really do. That's what's cool. So you can pick up some. They do have some differences. By the way, I probably mentioned this before. My sister-in-law is a physicist down at Columbus State University. Whenever we get together, we always talk shop. And I have a head son, how can you have anything to say? She studies physics, you study political science. Hey, our methods are the same. We got plenty to talk about. The same analytical skills that she pushes for, the same ones I use. Our subject matters are different, that's all. But it's still science. So if you think about this, science is not necessarily what you study, it's how you study. That's something that comes from psychology professor Chuck Cramer when he did some analysis. Most people just assumed it was the content rather than the process. Now, the natural sciences do have some difference. We're not a natural sciences program. How many of y'all had Bio 1, Bio 2, Chemistry 1, Chemistry 2, Physics 1, Physics 2? Okay, a couple of y'all have it. Okay, here's where some differences are. For all you who, how many of you think of them as hard sciences? You're going to figure out why they're hard. It's not just that they're tough. Hard sciences, they have to have greater control over the subject matter. There's a lot you can do in biology and chemistry and physics, and a lot you're expected to do that you don't see in social sciences. You have to control a whole bunch of different factors, and you have that greater control. When y'all took biology, did y'all dissect something? You did? They don't do dissection here. How about in high school? Do y'all do dissection? Did y'all have that thing where you had to dissect a worm?
Yeah.
And you went to the lunchroom and they served spaghetti and you're like, what are the odds? I think we dissected a grasshopper, like a giant locust. I'm not grossing out. Didn't do a fish. My brother was a much better student than me, but I remember he always struggled in that. He said, I don't think I did so, we were having lunch, he goes, I don't think I did so well on my test on the perch, the fish. I said, really, how do you know? He goes, well, my fish had several livers. I said, it didn't have an air bladder? He goes, air bladder. I guess when you open it up, it all looks like livers. But yeah, I mean, we don't dissect humans, however, certainly not live ones. But if you think about it, that's what certain countries that we fought in World War II. That's the kind of stuff that was done. Not just to Jews and Gypsies, but often to captured Americans. Many of them subjected to horrible scientific experiments. And our country would never do anything like that. No, we would never stoop so low as to experiment on humans in such a way. In ghastly medical experiments, would we? Some of you are looking at me. Why? Something wrong with that statement? Go ahead. I see a couple nodding. Did we ever do something like that, where we do all kinds of cruel medical experiments on people?
Well, I think I heard something about, you know, the people who built work on the atomic bombs, the scientists who were working on those, they experimented on prisoners.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
I think that.
I mean, I know that we'd have some people go out, you know, they go around a Pacific island that we vaporize or something like that and try and see what was going on. Oh, I don't know about experimenting on Native Americans. I know they used to, like, skull collection and analysis of skulls was a big deal. Hopefully correctly attained. Can you think of, anybody think of something in our history? I'll give you a hint. It's within 100 miles of this school.
Yeah, didn't they test out a disease on a group of people? I can't remember the name of it.
It's called the Tuskegee.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, within 100 miles of here, just down the road, just down I-85, you can go off. Yeah, it was a test of syphilis, something that would treat it. Some people got the some people got the treatment, some people didn't because you needed a control group. Yeah, back in the old days, our enemies and ourselves went too far in trying to have control over the subject matter. You know, they wanted to see an experiment group and a control group. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we did experiment stuff on prisoners. We certainly did experiment a lot on that. I don't know about the atomic stuff, but in other ways, yeah. People would experiment certain techniques and trainings on prisoners and stuff to see if things worked. So it's something a lot of people did, including this country. And so there are great restrictions on when it comes to analyzing human beings. In fact, just to do this project, I have to get approval from the college because we're looking at survey data. Even asking somebody a question like, you know, what's your name, your age, which political party you support, I would need to get IRB support for that. You know, and you're like, what? Just asking what their political party is, what's the harm in that? None, which is why they're going to approve it. But to study human beings, somebody needs to be checking on that because of past abuses. Have you ever heard about the Stanford experiment? Anybody heard this? I heard they made it into a movie. They made half the class. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Britt.
Oh, the one where they were testing like the people in they went to jail and it made someone really like go crazy. Like some of the students were like
well, they created a jail in the classroom.
Yeah, and some of the students were the guards and some of the students were prisoners.
Prisoners and guards. The prisoners were told to resist guards. The guards were told they had to keep the prisoners in line. And by the end, it was like Lord of the Flies, where like guards are beating prisoners and doing everything they can. And I know most of you are thinking, oh, I'd never do anything like that. It's because there were a lot of jerks in the 1960s going to Stanford, that's why. We're much more enlightened people now. I read a really chilling report about somebody who wanted to expose private prisons, so he became a private prison guard to see what it was like, and he was writing about the horrors of the place. The most terrifying thing was him writing that by the end, he found himself being like a lot of guards, roughing up the prisoners and stuff just to get through the day. You know, even though he was in to expose all the abuses, he said, I found myself being in the same situation. There's a lot of guards starting to do some of the same things that, you know, some of the more abusive guards were doing. That was terrifying. It shows that it could be anybody in that situation. He obviously left his job to write about, they were starting to get onto him that he wasn't really there to be a guard, but to write about the abuses. He was there to write about the abuses of the system. He found himself darn near a contributor to them. Scary, one of the scariest things I've ever read. That includes all that Stephen King stuff. Social science, we have less control over subject matter for that reason. There are rules about testing humans. And not only that, the thing about it, humans are really hard to test. Give me something outside of biology. Something about human behavior, non-biological, that we always do. All humans do that. It is really hard to come up with that. Just like we're a mercurial bunch. People are doing all kinds of random stuff, right? Totally unexpected. Hey, watch this. Yeah, exactly. Who would have thought? Many of these things even somewhat irrational, right? We're just a very different person. Science, hard sciences, they're looking for scientific laws. Can you think of any scientific laws from the hard sciences?
All energy must be conserved.
Okay. Laws about energy, the conservation of energy. Laws of inertia, right? Something that always happens, right? Law of gravity, something that always happens or never happens. It's much harder to find one of those things about human beings. Something where humans always do something or never. If you find something that humans always do or never do, don't tell me, don't tell your classmates. Seriously, go off to Madison Avenue or Wall Street and make a lot of money. No, you should. True story, real quick. When I was in DC, worked for a defense contract firm. We had a guy who was an accounts manager who always talked about this legendary analyst. And I said, where is he? Oh, this person's making millions up in New York. I said, really? What did he do? He discovered a piece of the tree. That's what our accounts manager told us. Notice, he didn't say he discovered the whole tree. He discovered a piece of the tree. Made a lot of money. If you can find a strong tendency, the closest you can get to a scientific law is worth something. I always like that line. Discovered a piece of the tree. So often we have to, instead of looking for scientific laws, something that always occurs, we look for generalizations. What often happens, usually, typically, it's really hard to find a scientific law about human behavior. But those tendencies, those predilections can still be pretty important. Is there a connection between level of education and income level among individuals? Or, to put it more simply, is college worth it? That'd be kind of interesting, right? Well, do you think that, make it a little bigger. The educated people are always wealthier. The more education you have, the wealthier, they're going to be the most wealthy people in the world. Probably not. Right? The most educated people, never wealthier. They're the poorest of the poor. Now, right? Not going to find scientific laws here. We're not going to prove something. Have you all taken a math class where you have to do mathematical proofs? Got to be something that occurs in every single situation. That's why I'd rather use obscenities in class than use the P word. That's proof. Don't say prove or prove. Seriously, every time I see that, I'm like, we're not proving anything. Anybody here, I don't know, take a personal day, you get a little sick, you were in high school, I gotta stay home. And after sleeping for like 2 hours, you turned on The Price is Right. Y'all do that? When I was a little kid, Price is Right was one of my favorite shows. My mom stopped having me watch it when I was like, they're trying to say how much a wash machine's worth, and I'm like yelling, $6.90, $6.90. I guess she realized I had too much, I had to be cut off. But you notice how they would have commercials? Then for some products, because it's always about products, right? My favorite was spray and wash. I think they use spray and wash for everything. Spray and wash was like, run all kinds of ads. You ever see that where they would like put spaghetti sauce on somebody's shirt? Back in the 70s, this is before they probably had rules on this. Somebody walk in by, oh, excuse me, sir, and then they put some spaghetti sauce on your shirt. No, well, they put some on the other, and they're like, check it out. We're gonna do some of it with spray and wash, and some of it with OLB. What is OLB? Other leading brand. They never say which one. You ever see that? And then they're like, look, see, this one that came out totally. This one's kind of orangish. Yeah, I don't think that would be a good idea, not with standard ground laws and stuff. Orange spaghetti on sauce on somebody might overreact. But yeah, and then they would say, this proves, and you're like, ooh. But back then, I'm a little kid, yeah, it does prove. No, it doesn't. But it is interesting to see if, in general, on average, your level of education leads to more income. That'd be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? Here's something, this is going to be the part of your day. You can't judge a theory, therefore, by how correct it is, right? If we can't prove something. Theories are judged, these abstract theories, by how useful they are. See what I told you? If we don't have scientific laws, what do we? Is this a useful question to ask? That's what you got to do before going to theories. Theories are deliberately abstract. They're too vague to test. So if you hear that, you can do this. Write this down, type it up. Right? Test the theory. Okay? All right, then put an X to it, or put a line to it. And on your laptop, there's like some device where you can like put a line to it. Okay. You can make it in red. Yeah. I have to do this myself. Every so often I'll say test the theory, and I'm like, I did it wrong again. Yeah, theories are supposed to be very vague, apply to as many situations as possible. That's how they become useful. My dissertation advisor put it this way. He said, a good theory is like a Jeep. You can take it pretty much anywhere. If you got a better metaphor, let me know. Right? I mean, take it mud, gets decent mileage going up and down the street. Right? If you washed it up afterwards and wax it up, you can take it out for a night on the town. They used those things for World War II. Yeah, Hitler often said he cursed the person who invented the Jeep because they were just so, not exactly, but they agreed. But yeah, we look for general theories that can apply to as many situations as possible. A lot of different ways to interpret education, a lot of different ways to interpret income, right? I know that sounds really weird, but that's what a theory does. Maybe this is why people don't like science as much. You can't prove this theory. Yeah, you can't. And that's by design. It's not an accident. Theories are pretty much abstract general statements that we find interesting. You know, because if a question's not interesting, why ask it, why pursue it, why investigate it? So when you come up with a theory about storytelling, an idea about storytelling, ask yourself, who cares? And if it's something that you think people would care about, go for it. Make sense? Yeah, we're not going to be doing the proving part of theories. Does that mean we're going to test nothing? Nope. Here's the solution. The hypothesis. is the solution to vague theories. Here's what a hypothesis is. Okay, here's another thing to write down. Write down educated guess. Now what am I going to ask you to do? Jacob. Any Jacob.
Cross it out.
Cross it out, you're right. I don't know why that's like an oxymoron. Educated, because if it's, it's guess, it's not going to be educated, right? I know people made you memorize that in high school. But in the words of Master Yoda, you must unlearn what you have learned. Right? It's not an educated guess. In fact, a hypothesis is a specific, testable version of a theory. Remember what I said? What did that person discover and made a lot of money off of? What did they discover? What?
Part of the truth.
Part of the truth, yes. Or a piece of the truth. That's what you're going to do. You couldn't possibly test all elements of a broad, grand theory that's applicable, but you can get a bite-sized piece of it in this semester. How many of you saw that Indiana Jones movie, the one with the crystal skulls? At this point, some of y'all are like, okay, Dr. Torres has lost it. Okay. Do you remember they had that Russian gal who's in charge and she takes the skull from everybody else and she's going to give it back to the aliens? If you haven't seen this movie, just go with it. But they say okay, the aliens somehow, however they do it telepathically, or they say however they do it. I'm not a crystal skull believer, by the way. I thought that part was a bit hokey, but I like this part. Remember they're like, we're going to give you a gift for returning this crystal skull to us. And what does she ask for? I want to know. And it was really quiet in the theater, and I said something like, oh crap! Probably a different word. My wife was like, that's a really bad idea. Like your brain would fry if you knew everything. Anybody seen the movie? Spoiler alert. What happens? Brain explodes. Okay, you want to know everything? Oh, it's going to take a couple minutes to download. Too much. You ever heard the phrase, TMI? Too much information, right? They don't usually say that as a positive, right? It's not like, woo, that was too much information. Great job, Dr. Tripp. No, it was like, whoa, TMI. My kids were learning about Adam and it was a Bible lesson for the kids, was about Adam and Eve. What did they do? Knowledge. Too much to handle. They got to realize that was not a good idea. So, again, science is not anti-religion. More religious content. Too much information. Always better to have a piece of the truth. That way, a couple things. One's bite-sized. We can handle it in a semester. You don't have to write a dissertation for this class, so small bite-sized piece of studying is a good thing. Elizabeth, can I use your example? Storytelling in nursing. Some people have some theories about what's effective storytelling in nursing. Having somebody who's out there who's like a really good speaker, who can kind of smooth over problems, would that be a good idea for a teaching hospital? Maybe somebody who doesn't have a smooth, slick voice like me. Maybe even a little uncomfortable with public speaking, but make sure all the facts are out there. What would be better? Be a bite size. Would you be able to study every single situation of teaching hospitals or public ones? No, but you can look at what Shands Hospital did at the University of Florida a couple of years ago in a study of 50 cases of teaching what happened to a patient. A little more bite size, right? Won't give us all the truth. Then again, our brains won't explode. Sound fair? So that's what hypothesis is. It is also a connection between variables. It's just a more specific, testable version. Big, broad theory, bite-sized hypothesis. I can't draw on this, but usually what I do on a whiteboard, blackboard, whatever, is a big old circle for T equals truth, or theory, and a little H, Mighty Joe's pizza slice, hypothesis. Sound good? You can draw it. use some funky graphics, Jacob, to design it. So education income, pretty vague. Whether a person went to college or not, and their annual income, a little more bite-sized. Over a limited period of time, something we can handle in class. Make sense? Okay, stop me if I'm going too fast or if I'm going off the rails or so. Go ahead, anybody? Question? Okay, every theory and hypothesis has at least two variables. Some have more, but all have at least two variables. Otherwise, you get to Taoism where they ask, well, they even bring up the point to bring up another religion or more of a way of thought. What is the sound of one hand clapping? It doesn't work so well. Yeah, this one's going to get more people cheering. Right? I took an Asian religions class. That was my favorite line. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Okay, 2. So the 2 we look at, all of them have at least 2. Some have more than that. I mean, more types, but these are the 2 types that every one of them has. Does that make sense? Yeah. Independent variable, causal variable. It does the changing. Dependent variable is the one that changes, or is possibly changed by independent. So we call it the IV and the DV. Let me give you an example for this. So if you want to think about it, this is almost a level proof, but just as a metaphorical device, use this. Don't use it in your actual paper. But you think of cause and effect. Somebody give me a theory you've been writing down, an idea, a hypothesis. Go ahead. A connection between variables. What should be one? I know, I gave you an example, but what's another one? Been kicking around one? Do I need to wait till Wednesday? Wait, it is Wednesday. Can I wait till Friday? Or do I wait till Wednesday? How about in 10 minutes? So what's a good theory?
America donates more money to public transportation and less pollution would be used.
Okay, all right. How Americans donate money. Public transportation versus, simplify it, just say like, how much we spend on, how about how much we spend on roads for cars? Like how much is spent on roads? How do we do it simple? You could actually test this. Like roads in Atlanta. How much is spent on roads in Atlanta versus MARTA? Because some places like Wyoming don't have public transportation. Does that make sense? So you can do that. You can take a look at dollars. Or how many people ride MARTA versus how many people drive to work. Right? So what factors are we looking at? What are our 2 factors?
The cost.
Oh, okay. Like how much is spent? Yeah, this is actually a little complicated. We're looking at 2 items: public transportation versus roads for private cars. Both are public works projects, right? And then you can compare, because they also, it's not just MARTA. I know people just draw like MARTA barely goes anywhere, but don't they do other stuff? Like, what if you don't live along that T? What do you do? Is that it, or do they use something else? Don't they have buses, like connector buses, that can get you? Like if you may not live right next to a MARTA station, but you can take a bus to a MARTA station, right? At least it's that way in DC Metro when I was there. Okay. So you're looking at, let's see, like government budgets, and then whether it goes to budgets for private transportation versus public transportation.
What would be the independent?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. That's why it's really hard.
Wouldn't independent be like the number of people who actually go to work? They're not going to. The
Okay.
cost is dependent.
That's an idea. Like how many people take one versus the other? Individual, so connection between individuals using the service and money being spent. I told you science was hard. That was a hard one to think about because I was almost darn near the one hand clapping part. But that makes a good sense. If you say people using a service and how much is spent on it.
So would the independent variable be what, how much is spent on it? The government.
That's a good one. What would be?
Because if you change that, then the dependent variable, the impact of
Yeah,
people.
this is almost like a chicken and egg question, isn't it? Which one would you like to look at? In other words, do you want to look, the question is, do you want to look at people using the service, or do you want to look at people, or how much the government spent, or what the government is spending on?
Some people don't have cars, so
They have to use partners. Or it's too expensive, they may only have one car or something like that, so one person has to take it. Yeah, I think if, let's put this, if I'm a political scientist, I want to see if people using a service translates to dollars. What's a way around this? I'm gonna get, this is gonna be really complicated for American experience, but think about this. If people are using a service, government spends money, maybe if governments changed how much they spent, like if government spent more on public transportation, would people use it more then? How does that sound? So we'd say before and after. So you could say, okay, Kasim Reed increases the MARTA budget by 20%. Will they get more people riding? How does that sound? Increase in budget, whether people would take the service or not. By that, they could, reach more places, or they could lower fares, so it would be more attractive to people. How does that sound? Wow, that was like really good for American experience. Most people are like usually like, should I study for this test or so? You guys are like thinking about like infrastructure issues and public budgeting. You're gonna keep me on my toes this semester. But yeah, the best way to approach when you want to look at something, when your own examples, and I'll be asking you, I'll start quizzing you on Friday morning. I'll ask you for examples of this. So write them on down. Always think about the dependent variable first. What do you want to explain? When you came up with that question, Jacob, what were you thinking of?
Well, I actually went to a different direction.
Oh, okay, no, go ahead. Remember, a theory has an infinite number of hypotheses.
No, it's just because in Europe, there's more public transportation, such as high-speed trains and buses, so like the air quality is a lot better compared to, Atlanta, where they have like cars, basically.
Oh man, you're opening up a whole can of comparative politics. Right? Because now we got another variable. What's this variable?
Air quality. Wow.
Wait. Go ahead. What was, okay, so your dependent variable is what?
Air quality.
Air quality, okay. And what explains it?
Well, the independent variable would be the amount of public transportation used. So I was doing a comparison of public transportation used in European countries.
Could you not have Europe versus America?
Well, we could.
European practices versus American practices to see if there's an impact on Europe. So you see what the independent variable is? The different countries and their focus on public or private transportation. That's one side. The other side would be the outcome, air quality. One of the studies I did in DC, in fact, looked at pollution studies, comparing not just America and Europe, but a whole bunch of countries throughout the world. So yeah, that's one that people work on.
So in order to test that hypothesis,
Sure.
though,
Oh, yeah,
would you, in Europe, you would add more private transportation, and then in, like here, you would take away the private and just do public transportation? How do you even test that?
What would be a better way? Go ahead. I was going to give all these, but I think y'all might have some good
I think
ideas.
that'd be hard to just over here, because you can't take somebody's car and put them and say, yeah. That'd be hard.
Anybody have an idea about how to test it? Go ahead.
High-speed train system connecting every major city.
That's like an outcome or something. How about this? You can already see what people are doing now. You're talking about the implications of the study. You can look at what percentage of our transportation budget in America goes to private versus public. I mean, it's all public spending, right? But like spending on roads versus spending on trains, buses, public transportation. So public money for private, public money for public. Make sense? You can look at the European average compared to the Americans. Then you can look at CO2 levels, what they have in Europe and what they have in the United States. Could you do that?
So so the government in America would give people money to get on the.
No, I'm just saying what we do already. So in other words, we already allocate like money for roads versus money for MARTA, Metro, buses, public transportation. I bet you Europe, I don't know this for sure, but I bet you Europe allocates a lot more for public transportation. So you can look at percentage of transportation budget that goes to public versus goes to private cars. Did that not make sense?
I was thinking about something else though.
Oh, what, go ahead, what's yours? No, go ahead. Right. You get to see why there are an infinite number of studies in theory, right? We're looking at pollution and public transportation, right? Y'all are doing an excellent example. You should be, that's why I'm not asking you like to put you on the spot, why I'm putting you on the spot. Not to belittle you, right? But to show you how there can be an infinite number of pollution and public transportation studies, right? Then you can look at, you can also compare US cities, those that have public transportation versus those that don't. Like Chicago has like what, elevated trains, they got buses all over the place. They sink a fair amount into public transportation. Compare them to Indianapolis that does not. And you can take a look at air quality, right? Granted, there's some cities like Denver, which, I mean, they're just set up for pollution, right? You breathe in at least the pollution in Denver, so you don't want to include it unless you want to compare Denver to another similar city high up in the mountain that can have smog trapped up there, El Paso, Texas, where I was raised. You can see if one is better than the other. Let's say Denver invests more in public transportation than El Paso. Two areas up in the mountains that can, surrounded by mountains that can trap smog. Who does a better job? See how that works somewhat? Not as much, really good. Other ideas. See, there are an infinite number of ways we can look at this, right? You can look at the number of people who drive cars versus those who take public transportation. See if that's a thing. How many hypotheses can be taken from a theory? Who here has had a philosophy class? Or religion class? Y'all ever had one? That phrase, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? You heard that one before? Like, well, we don't know how big an angel is, right? An angel could be like as big as those statues in the Catholic Church, or it could be like super small, like smaller than Ant-Man. Okay? We don't know. How many hypotheses can come from a theory? We don't know, right? There could be an infinite number, which is why knowing all of them would be a really bad idea, right? It would also show how hard it is to prove a theory, right? But we can test bite-sized pieces of a really good issue, which is public versus private. See, I think it was did y'all think about that as roads, like government spends on roads for cars? Like that's government money. So every time somebody's like, oh, we need to take government money, we shouldn't be spending government money on public transportation. What they're really saying is we should spend more government money on private transportation. Most people have private roads. Do we have private roads? Do we? There are private roads. Like, there's one neighborhood where I go jogging, and if I go down there, they're like, this is private property, trespassers will be shot beyond this, and they kind of have like a makeshift road that goes another 50 feet to West Point Lake. That's a private road. It's full of rocks. I wouldn't go anywhere there. I would twist an ankle if I did run that. They don't keep all the rocks out of the road too well. But that's a private road. I think they own that property and they just sort of built a road on their property. Right? But the rest of it, it's all tax money. Right? So just interesting, you know, every time I hear somebody say, we shouldn't have public transportation, why? Well, that's government money. What do you think the interstates are? They're not owned by Steven Spielberg or Bill Gates or something, right? I mean, that's our tax dollars as well. thinking, communist. It just, I mean, there's a pile of tax money, and where are our priorities is where we go. In some cases, we spend more on highways. What we really need to do is give my brother some business. He works for Google. They're making those smart cars. Like you just get into them and they take you. Are they more energy efficient? They are. I think we're oh, I'm going over, so make sure you get to your next classes. This isn't West. This isn't the West Hill. That's the next one, right? Slow me down on the last time. When we get back, I'll quiz you about what science is, theory, hypothesis, independent, dependent variables, and I'll ask for a couple of examples. Then we'll move on from there, and we'll figure out this Friday whether you should be in college or not.